No, Steven, you're the
You're
dude.
the dude.
Well, that's not what we're talking about tonight, but Steven is the dude. Welcome to Chinwag Nation, episode 27. We just finished our series on garbage in, garbage out. We're kind of just going into more of a free flowing period in our lives. It's been a little bit since we've been on. We took some time for family and just rest and some transition stuff going on. But we're super excited to be here today with you all just to talk about what it takes to truly transform. And, one of the things that we always say at the beginning of our lives is this is our opinion, doesn't reflect past, current, future employers. It's just us having a good chinwag, talking about business, talking about life, talking about leadership. And we really just enjoy this community building aspect of our lives and just connecting with people in our community, whether it's people we know, people we don't know, who join us and just learn about what it takes to build community and leadership. And so this week's question, right, that we posed, that we talked about online was in our posts was I just said what we talked about online. I feel like that's like something you would say like 20 years ago. Like, is that even a thing anymore? I don't
Talking
know.
about just general announcement.
Just saying the word, online.
Online.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's kind of like saying dial-up now.
I know. I
Yeah.
feel like I'm really dating myself. I do remember dial up though. I do remember
Oh yeah.
AOL dial up. So that was definitely a memory of mine. Now if something moves that slow, I'm just like, oh, I need to go reset my router or something like that. But what does it take to truly transform? And I think there's like it's so open, right? When you think about that question. And like you can think about it in business, you can think about it in your personal life, your family life, your spiritual life. I mean, it's a really, really broad subject, but I think for or a broad concept, broad question. But I think for this live, for this week, we're really talking about in the work setting and like, organizational transformation. Like, what does it take to truly transform? And I don't know, when I wrote in the posts on the various social media platforms, I talked about kind of three core words, right? I talked about humility. And when I wrote it, I wondered if when I wrote what I wrote, I wondered if it would, maybe trigger some folks to be like, well, what do you mean what do you mean it's not as common in the workplace anymore? And we'll kind of dig into that, at least my perspective on that. I talked about grit, and then I talked about courage, and I those are the things that came to my mind when I first thought about this idea. Like, what does it mean to truly transform? But Stephen, from your perspective, like like when you think about that question, you think about the workplace setting, like what comes to mind for you?
Yeah, man. I love that like we haven't done any preparation for this because then we're just speaking just right off the cuff and from the
Yeah,
heart. Right?
yeah, man.
Humility absolutely comes to mind. Um, I oftentimes interchange like humility and vulnerability in uh
Yeah,
in the
I can
same
see that.
concept,
I can see that.
um, especially from a leadership community perspective. I agree with courage and grit, but I'd also say that it takes clarity and discipline, to truly transform in
Oh, why?
any
Like, what do you
direction,
mean by that?
big or small. Well, clarity, right? Like I've found that transformation fails when people don't necessarily understand what is changing, why it matters, and how decisions will be made.
Mhm.
Right. And then
Yeah. Okay.
discipline, I think, is what turns, I would say, like these inspirational um, and aspirational ideas into sustained behavior.
You're talking about
Right.
just like consistency,
Yeah,
right? Like,
accountability, metrics, rituals, follow through, like a lot of the stuff that we were talking about from a cultural standpoint, right? Like that's super important if you want change to stick. Human beings, very much like all the other elements of this world, right? Follow the path of least resistance, right? So similar to water, right? It's going to flow in the easiest direction. And transformation, despite the fact that things are changing all the time, can be really hard. People are very quick to set foot back in their old ways. And we've heard study
Mm.
after study after study about how it takes a certain amount of time to actually develop habitual change, right? So
Yeah.
transformation just takes discipline in a lot of different areas, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I've participated in several transformations now, technological, business
Hmm.
related, culturally related, and oftentimes I will see people attempt to design the future with the same design elements as where they're at currently, right? So they're not really transforming; they're just bringing the way they're doing things now into the future, right? Culture. It's really, you're right. It's really hard to move off that spot once you get comfortable. I mean, I've seen it where technology transformation, right? The current processes, how they're doing work is designed into the new system, right?
Yeah,
Versus leveraging the new system and what it has, right? And I've seen that in the small scale, I've seen it in the large scale, and it's because it's what's comfortable. Um,
for sure,
yeah.
for sure. And I think sort of piggybacking on that, we're always so quick to solution, right? And a lot of times people don't truly understand like what the real problem is, and that's something worth noting as well. Spending time just truly understanding what the actual problem is, what are the root causes, not just the symptoms, right? Creates for a much more reasonable and easy to defend transformation strategy.
I don't know. I I've participated in some pretty hairy transformations, and I regularly say that large scale complex transformations, like even the word complex doesn't do them justice.
Yeah.
And I think to your points earlier, as human beings, we like things to be as predictable as possible,
Mhm,
which means that we like to put things in boxes. And
mhm.
the struggle with transformation is you can't put it in a box, right? You're digging up, you're looking under rocks that have never been looked under. You're pulling back walls that have been and covering things for decades that nobody wanted to look at, right? It's there's no way to put a transformation in a box, and I think that's what makes it so hard to grasp, and so when I wrote the word humility, I wrote true humility means not expecting perfection of yourself or those around you, because um a transformation, at least a big one, is imperfect in so
Yeah,
many ways. And and the reason why I said it's so rare today is because when you go into a large scale transformation, there's so many unknowns, there's so many levels of unpredictability. The first thing you do is try to control, right? And you try to control because you want things to be perfect. You want things to be perfect because if they're perfect, they're predictable, right? Quote unquote perfect. And so to truly step into a place of humility where I don't know everything. I'm not going to expect everything to work out perfectly, and I'm not going to expect everybody around me to emotionally react perfectly, and or do the thing perfectly, because they're you as a leader and those around you are entering into something that demands imperfection. And if it demands imperfection, it demands humility, right? And it's that's what I mean by you can't box you can't put a transformation into boxes. And so many times, right? Project management methodology and discipline, change management methodology and discipline, sponsorship principles, right? It's those are all definitions and boxes and things you want to check off and make sure you're doing, right? Measuring adoption, those types of things, like you have to do them, but there's a lot of imperfection in that process and kind of
Oh, for sure.
figuring things out as you go. And that's what I mean by it's rare. It's rare to see a leader or an organization or a work culture that doesn't want to intensely control during a transformation. And don't get me wrong, like you got to keep things within scope and on schedule and within budget, right? You those kind of three core tenets of
Yeah.
a healthy project
Management.
progression. But within within that those walls you've created, right? There's just a bunch of just like messy,
No, for sure.
which requires humility, right? Like
Yeah.
an expectation that you're probably going to fall on your face as a leader, and those around you are probably going to fall on your face a few times. But you got to dust each other off. You got to pick each other up and keep marching. Keep moving forward. And so when I wrote that
Yeah.
that's rare, I think it really is a rare thing to truly have a a what's the word, undercurrent of humility in a transformation.
And from a leadership community's perspective, I think doubling down on the importance of psychological safety and cultural norms to be able to do that is super important, right? I feel like every organization now talks about fail fast, fail often
They talk
type
about it.
culture, right? But
They
then
talk about it,
you
sure.
also hear like expectations are going from here to here and here to here
Yeah,
and here to
right.
here, right? You're like, well, how can I make a mistake then? And then,
Yeah.
even when you interview, right? Like people want experience, but they also want perfection. And it's like experience is a compilation of our failures, right? Like
Yeah,
when,
for sure.
when you learn from it, man.
Yeah. My greatest learnings have come from my greatest failures, right?
Totally.
I'm sure that's some famous person's quote. I did
Some
not try to.
cliche somewhere.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right.
It's so
Right.
true. It's so true. Yeah, I make
Yeah.
mistakes all the time. And then, figuring out how do you like politically navigate that within each organization's culture. Be
That's
a lot of emotional stress.
I was just saying last week that when I had to lead an organization, it's like 50 something. I'm here, start my beautiful wife joined us. I'm here, start over. I um I was just sharing last week when I had to lead like almost over 50 people during the COVID response period. During that time I I learned how to make decisions without all the information,
Yeah.
right? Like you just day to day, week to week, you're like, I think this is the right call. I'm probably going to get in trouble for this one, but we're going to move forward anyway, right? And that kind of that actually kind of leads to one of the other words I wrote down, and that's the courage piece. When I wrote down courage, uh, I wrote down making decisions without all the information, and I wrote the 80-20 rule. And
Yep.
I think a lot of times in transformations and especially in the business space, like if you're 80% of the way there, have the courage to make the call, right? Sometimes even if you're over 50% of the way there, have the courage to make the call.
Yeah.
I talk often in the projects that I lead now about this idea of your decision velocity should match the project velocity. And I got that from actually a project manager I've worked with. Your decision velocity should match the project velocity. And sometimes that means you got 50-60% of the info, uh, and you got, in order to keep the project moving, right, the transformation moving, you got to make the call. And
Sometimes
I
less than 50%, buddy.
sometimes it's less than 50%, but that's like, so when I wrote the word courage,
Yeah.
that's what came to mind. And again, I don't think that that's as common today. I don't think it's a normal thing uh, to have a situation where leaders, especially leaders in a politically right sensitive space, um, are comfortable making calls that aren't fully informed.
Yeah.
especially in the age of data, right? In the age of analytics at your fingertips via AI, in the age of like visual management galore, that you do a natural language search, and all of a sudden you've got a dashboard, sourcing
Sure. For sure.
data in real time, like that. Um, but even that data is not always 100% on the back end, right?
Yeah.
In terms of quality, but just having that courage to make the call right without all the info.
Yeah. I thought of when you said courage, I was sort of triggered because I've learned about this concept of moral injury, right?
Mm.
But at the same time, there's also this concept of moral courage. And I think
Okay,
transformation.
I think you're gonna have to break that down.
Yeah, well, I'm just
So
kind of going
so
to moral courage to
okay.
um, piggyback on what you were talking about, but like transformation often requires confronting things people have learned not to say out loud. Right.
You've always been really good at that, though.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not shy about speaking my mind. But old incentives are broken. A sacred process no longer serves the customer. A
Yeah.
leader's behavior is creating fear. A
Mhm.
metric is driving the wrong behavior. A team is overlooked. A strategy is incoherent. A technology investment is masking a culture problem, right? Like all these things
Mhm.
exist, but nobody talks about them. People are afraid to put it out there. But
Is
without
that why you were
address,
triggered?
well, no, just like it came to my mind this idea of courage, which was not one of my initial descriptors or variables of transformation. So just wanted
Okay.
to dive a little
Okay.
bit deeper.
Yeah.
And
No, it's you're. I mean, why do you think people won't talk about it?
I mean, psychological safety is probably one.
Yeah. Okay.
Um, and I think that's probably one of the most important variables that exists
Mm.
in a culture. I mean, this stuff's not easy to talk about. It's not easy to
No.
flag. It takes humility, right? Especially
Mhm.
from a leadership perspective. It takes somebody who's willing to listen and not be defensive and understand that it's about the process or about the thing and not about the leader themselves. And um, if you want to drive actual change, right, you need to capture the voice of your people.
Mm.
Um, and
And
what
do some,
sounds
and do something with it. Right.
exactly right.
Yeah.
And there's probably a long history that's existed, whether intentional or not, as to why people don't feel comfortable speaking up.
Yeah. With humility, with courage, I as a leader, right? Even if you're a new leader, I don't know if you need a whole lot of experience to do those things and show up in that way, right? It's I do believe though that psychological safety plays a role in that, and I also think there's right, that's kind of the nature part of psychology, and then there's like the nurture part. I do think that like how people are coached and developed and supported and led, that does translate into how people show up in the workplace from a humility or a courage perspective. Like if I worked for a leader that made it, that taught me how to and modeled how to show up in a humble way, or modeled how to show up in a courageous way. It's one thing to make it safe, but it's another thing to model it, right? um when it comes to those two things, when I think about the third word, which was grit, um I do think that requires a little bit of experience, right? Like you have to build some muscle memory. You have to um, have been through some things before. And and what I wrote down was grit. My definition of grit, at least in the space of transformations, was um, it's not toxic positivity, right? It's not like everything's positive all the time, but it is about the art of the possible. I think folks that model grit um, lean super hard, super heavy into the art of the possible. The good that will come from the extra effort, right? The good that will come from like just busting out that last inch of energy required to get the thing done, right? They're just, it's in my mind, it's like there's a direct connection between the art of the possible and um, having been through it
Yeah,
before.
for
And
sure.
then that kind of works back to the idea of like grit, you know.
Yeah, I would say like grit and persistence, right? I mean, there's
Yeah,
the I
that's
know
where
I know
yeah.
I know you're thinking of like don't put things in boxes, but there's that very natural human behavior of like you're inspired and then you hit the valley of despair and then you hit
Oh yeah.
sustainability, right? And
Oh
like
yeah, that is going to happen no matter
yeah,
whether you love
for
love the
sure.
change or not. I when I said putting transformation in boxes, what I meant is uh make trying to make things neat and predictable, and when they are
Yeah.
not in the box, right, then they're not really there.
Well, if
You know that
people
they're not a real thing if they're not in the box, you know.
well, so many organizations quit in the messy middle, you know, and
Mhm.
they'll
That's
launch
right.
with energy, they hit friction, and they drift back into old habits. And real transformation requires staying power or grit or
Mhm.
persistence or perseverance, whatever you
Yeah.
want to call it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I perseverance, persistence are definitely a function of grit. Like when I took a more of a positive lens on it, right? The
Yeah.
what we were what we are doing right now, because again, transformations, especially like major whole organization transformations, are exceptionally difficult and challenging and hard. Um, I think when I think about grit, I think about this idea that as a leader, you are intrinsically motivated and you are modeling for your people that no matter how hard it gets, it is possible to win
Yeah.
in through the circumstances that we're going through.
Yeah.
We're still going to see the other end of this thing,
Yeah.
right? And we are going to come out on the other end, maybe a little bit beat up, but we're going to get there. And that, in my mind, exemplifies this concept of like grit, right? It's the art of the possible, the nobody, if you've never, as a leader, if you've never been through a whole organization, major transformation, nothing can prepare you for that.
Yeah.
Nothing, nothing.
Well,
And there's something to be said about ha- in order, I think, in order to live in this space of grit, um, I live this out. I think it's important to have been through one before.
yeah. Oh, for sure.
Um, right. I think that's kind of where I'm coming at it.
It's always kind of funny because, and this might just be my own perception, but I feel like when I talk to people and they think about transformation or they're asking people about their transformation experience, they want to know, like, okay, you started at point A
Right.
and you went to point B, right? And
No.
I feel like
A dot one
transformation
dot
is not,
two.
it's not proven at launch and it's not proven when the project ends, right? Like it's
Right.
proven in the middle. So when things
That's
get
right.
political and uncomfortable and ambiguous,
Mm,
right? Like
yeah.
that's a story you tell. That's what
Mhm.
sets you apart from all the other people that have done these transformations is like what actually happened um,
Yeah. There's
to
this
get you there.
concept.
Right?
There's this concept of like the importance and the value of glue people in your organization.
Of what people? Glue people?
Glue glue people,
Okay.
right? You know, they're the ones in that messy middle who are keeping everybody together. Like they're keeping people from
Yeah.
jumping off the ledge. They're keeping people from going into their silos. Or they're actually like, I think I've used this example in in previous lives, but they're like, you know, that move in Spider-Man where he's shooting webs on either side of the ship, and he's pulling the ship back together so it doesn't
Yeah,
sink.
yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah.
Those people,
The glue people. Yeah.
the glue people. Um, yeah, like you need those folks too. Because to your point, I think uh, you can view change through a very linear lens, or you can view change like it's the quantum realm. Moms
Yeah.
are like blue people, Joe. That's absolutely right. They are in a lot of ways.
But
Um,
I feel like there's lots of different things you have to glue. And keep in mind, I'm just learning this glue people terminology.
I know,
But
Steven. I'm like, oh no, where's this conversation going?
right,
Are you gonna start
but
talking about Lincoln Logs and like popsicle sticks?
no, although
Okay, good.
man, I love me a good Lincoln Log session. But there's like all these different connections that have to happen in transformation, right? You have to connect strategy to process to people to technology and to
Yeah,
behavior. And
yeah.
I'm sure that there's other variables that I'm missing here. But if you only
Mhm,
transform the technology, the old culture will use the new tools and old ways, right? If you
mhm.
only transform the process, people may comply without believing, right? If you only
That's true.
transform the culture, you may inspire people but not necessarily give them the system to execute, right? So
Mhm.
I feel like that's where a lot of times that experience really comes in handy as
It
well,
does.
to be able to tie all those different things together.
Yeah, I love that, man. I wrote down a fourth word as I did do a tiny bit of prep. Just a
Did you?
tiny. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I was thinking about these words that I wrote, for the post at the very last minute the night before our live. And I was thinking about the words, and I was like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. And I just took some notes. I wrote some things down as I was preparing for right before this time. I wrote down the word energy. Uh, all these things take energy, but really, like, you're going to get, as a leader in a transformation effort, whether it's small, medium, large, whether you can go from A to B, or it's A.1 or A.1.2, right? A.1.2.3, and then to B. Um, it all takes an immense amount of energy, especially if you want to, like, quote unquote, be a good
Yeah.
leader through a transformation effort, and not listen. You're and not show stress behavior and humility. You will show stress behavior. You will get stressed out in the transformation.
Yeah.
Don't expect perfection from yourself. But what I wrote here was the importance of managing your energy and the energy of those around you. And you talked about psychological safety, which I think requires practice. Like, you have to practice creating safe spaces because it's different for everybody, right? It's different for every team, it's different for every organization. But what I wrote down is constantly asking the question, is this a priority? So just like practicing this idea of, like, is this the most important thing to work on? Is this the most important thing to pay attention to? Because in any transformation, there are going to be a lot of things. There's going to be a lot of noise, a lot of people stuff, a lot of box checking. There's a lot going on. So the idea of constantly asking, is this the most important thing to focus on? And then the second thing is just the function and practice of prioritization, right? The like how like building a system to do that, right? Building a way to do that. So when I think about managing my energy as a leader and managing the energy of those around me, because I mean, you can only go so far there, right? People are going to
Yeah.
worry about what they're going to worry about. They're going to focus on what they want to focus on. But you have a way to pull them into a reflective space to ask the question, is this the most important thing to focus on? And then have a way to, like, actually work through that prioritization of things.
Yeah, I hear that, man. I hear that. I mean, tying it back to psychological safety too makes me think of two things. I sometimes wonder if you could work for the best organization in the world, and I wonder if people nowadays um, are ever going to feel psychologically safe because people don't just want their job; people need their jobs, right?
Mhm.
And because of that, I feel like people make concessions as to what it is that they are, willing to take a risk on because they're afraid to lose that opportunity.
Mm.
And I remember, you know, back when I was studying about just like basic finances, right? And there's this concept of have a 3 to 6 month emergency fund,
Mm.
right? And like to me, like that always, I was like, yeah, rationally that makes sense. But then I remember reading in one book, and I wish I could remember which one. Somebody said like, if you had a 6 month emergency fund, would it change the way that you show up at work?
Probably.
And I was like, absolutely. Uh, Although I feel like I've got many a stories of how I've showed up honestly at work that probably are not podcast appropriate. And the things that I've called out and the things that I've said, but um, it's important to remember that like human to human, and tying this back to energy as well. Like culture is not what we say at kickoff. Culture is what we tolerate on a Tuesday. I feel like
Well,
feel like that's
write it down, folks.
gosh, I don't even know where that came from, but it's not.
Yeah.
I just learned that like culture is not defined by the things that like those inspirational things that leaders say during a big launch or an
Mm.
all hands meeting, right? Or a
Yeah.
strategy session, whatever. Culture is revealed in the ordinary moments when no one is like performing, right?
Yep.
What happens when people take risks? What happens when people fail, right? Those are the moments that matter and ultimately define that culture.
We're getting close to our wrap up time here. We talked about what does it take to truly transform, and we talked about humility. We talked about grit. We talked about courage, and the beauty in those three words is they really can mean something different, right? To every person. We talked about our thoughts on that, our definitions, what we think those things mean when it comes to transformation and transforming. What does it mean to truly transform? Um, and maybe you have something different to share. We'd be curious to hear, what your thoughts are. Um, either here or follow up with us after the fact. Would love your perspective. Stephen, if you were to leave folks with just kind of one final parting thought around this conversation, like and what it takes to truly transform, what would be your nugget? What would be your takeaway? Especially, I mean, there's a lot of people right now. There's a lot of organizations, private, public, nonprofit, who are going through technology transformations. Or they're setting up, they're preparing to launch into one.
Yeah.
So, like, if for a leader out there, like, what would be your big, you know, kind of what would be your takeaway for them to take with them as they're kind of going into this next week?
Yeah. I want to break that into two parts. The first thought is just like a general closing thought, but then the other is as it relates to sort of these technology transformations that are happening today, right? So I'd say like just to generally close that to me, true transformation is not just about becoming more efficient or more digital or more competitive. It's about becoming more honest or more adaptive, more aligned, maybe even like more capable of creating value in a changing world. And I'd say that the best transformations leave people with more clarity, more ownership, and more belief in what the organization can become.
Mm,
And
I like that.
I feel like that only happens when leaders are willing to transform themselves and not just the organization around them, right? Bringing it back to our leadership culture. And with that, I think it's important to realize like transformation right now, I think has a lot of people concerned. Technology transformation has a lot of people concerned. And I think people are trying to understand like what is actually changing, what is not changing, where do we use AI, where should we not use AI, what does responsible use look like, how do we protect customers, employees, organizations. um, People are wondering like, are they still going to be valuable? Are their roles going to disappear? Does their expertise still matter? Am I behind? Right. And I think as we think about as leaders in this AI transformation world, like AI transformation requires empathy, right? Because
Mm.
beneath the excitement, there's also fear. And if leaders do not address the fear honestly, people will either resist, hide, or perform adoption without real belief. And I think we just have to be, kind of tuned into that as leaders developing a leadership culture in the modern world. What about yourself, though?
I'm just gonna sit in that for a minute. See if
Yeah,
close my eyes. Soak that.
so good.
I'm just gonna soak that excellence in for a minute.
Well, thanks,
So
man.
good. So good. So good. Um, you know, in church today, they talked about this idea of when people experience God, right? When they experience His presence, it overwhelms folks. They instead of leaning into it, they might just dismiss it or look away from it. Or I'm going to get to a point here in a second, but I feel like there's a connection here. Um, uh, and what they encouraged in church today was like to actually, instead of fearing it, fearing it or running from it, to be curious, and to say, "Huh, I wonder why in this moment, right? God is here, right? God, I'm um, feeling that presence, that connection, and to be curious about it versus to deny it, right? And I think there's a parallel in transformation efforts, um, as a leader and for your people around you. When you in a transformation, you will experience and see things that you've never experienced or seen before ever in your life. And it's not expected that you're supposed to comprehend it right away. There's no expectation um, that you're supposed to figure it out in the moment and solve it immediately. However, I do see sometimes when those unknown things pop up or new things pop up or scary things pop up, the first thing they do is try to solve it immediately, and they expect their people to solve it immediately too.
Yeah,
So if there's any takeaway, I'd say like if you're leading a transformation or you're preparing to lead a transformation, just to really get good at being curious and teach your people to be curious too, because you'll be surprised. And there's no, we talked about humility and courage and grit. There's no expectation to find the perfect answer right away, but I think there is an expectation if you want to do it well and you want to have a psychologically safe and humble and empathic and gritty and courageous transformation. It's just to really start with curiosity.
yeah,
and just, slowly just kind of like poke the transformation and like, ooh, okay, if I try this thing, this has this reaction, or
Yeah.
so just to maintain a really strong presence and energy behind curiosity is, I think, what I would leave folks
Yeah.
with. Yeah,
Yeah. Love that.
yeah, yeah, good
I
stuff.
feel like now there's just so much more we could talk about.
I know. Well, you can sit in my excellence for a minute too, and just kind of close your eyes and soak it in, like I did for you, Steven.
Yeah, it's just your excellence smells funny. So
It's okay.
no,
You can close your eyes. Just soak it up. Soak it up.
a father of three, man. If I close my eyes right now, I'm going to be taking a
You're
nap.
gonna fall asleep. Well, thanks for those folks that joined us in and out tonight. If you watch this episode and you're just like curious about more, you can reach out to us anytime. Facebook, well, probably LinkedIn would probably be the better choice for you, Stephen, right? But just reach out to us. If you know us, you text us, call us. We'd love to learn from you too, and how you've gone through transformations and led to transformations yourself. Wishing you all
If
an amazing week. What's that, Stephen?
I just want to throw it out there, if people have topics that they want us to talk about, share
Yeah.
that, because we're kind of entering this period intentionally of kind of unscripted and unprompted. Um, Maybe that's the category, right? But if there are things that people want to talk about, let
Hit
us
us
know.
up.
Yeah.
Lean into the community. All right, y'all.
Yep.
Have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.